by Michael Doherty. Now, if there's one thing I've learned about our listeners here on Talkabout, it's that they're always interested in anything to do with health and overall well-being. So I thought it would be nice to track Michael down and invite him to join us on the programme this afternoon on the eve of his talk in Castleisland. And I'm delighted to say we have him on the line now. Michael, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Deirdre. And first of all, my apologies if my voice is a little bit hoarse. It's just after the game yesterday, unfortunately, with Clare and Cork in the hurling.
Yeah, I should have said at the outset, of course, you're a Clare man, so your heartbeat is only probably just returning to normal after yesterday. And Michael, I know you're going to be covering everything in your talk, from stress to digestive problems, so a whole lot to cover. But can I just bring you back to the very beginning? How did you become interested in this whole area day one?
Well, I've been doing this work for 24 years now, and my initial involvement in anything to do with this work was through the martial arts, going back to the mid-80s, late 80s, 1980s. And in Yugoslavia, they had developed a system of healthcare looking at working with the energy system of the body. And fortunately, I became aware of that and travelled to there solely from the interest of sport, obviously. But then, saw what they were doing there and the work that they had developed in working with the energy system of the body, which looked strange because you weren't touching the body. And then we came back to Ireland, and I suppose in a way just kind of we started fooling around with it and so on. And next thing, people were starting to feel better. And 1990, we ended up on a Late Late Show, where the Late Late Show gave birth at the time. It got several people for us to treat, and really the rest of it is history. We were kind of forced into this kind of life, Deirdre, really.
And it might be a very broad question, Michael, but why do you think there's so much ill health in our world these days? Is it what we're eating? Is it our environment? Are we working too hard? What is it?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. There's no doubt about it that when we look at the serious amount of stress in our society, I think stress, our food, and our water. I think there's no big secret as to why people are ill, but we're so emotionally stressed. People don't realize how stress affects the body. I mean, it really, really drags it down. It stops our absorption of nutrients. It affects our processing of foods. But the biggest challenge is our emotional stress, our fear, our worry, our anxiety. And I mean, it's just been established now from a scientific basis that people who have been diagnosed with serious illnesses like cancers, like depression, like motor neurons, Parkinson's disease, that the stress associated with this has a huge role in impinging the healing of that individual. So, yes, stress ties, our environment is contributing hugely to our problems. And we know we can eliminate, for example, a lot of bowel cancer by simply looking at our lifestyle. And, so it's no rocket science. We do have the answers to a lot of these problems. Just people need to be educated, and that's the purpose of my visit to Kerry.
And I know you write books as well, Michael, but when people come to see you, I presume you have a clinic or whatever in Clare. What do you do? What's your approach? Do you kind of sit them down and talk about their lifestyle, go through their diet? Do you talk about exercise to them? Is it like a holistic approach?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the key things, the primary cause of all illness is a breakdown within the energetic system of the body. This is where our primary focus is. And once we get the energy system of the body right, through a series of hand movements and techniques that we've developed to manipulate that energy in a certain way, then we look at the lifestyle of the patient, the nutrition, we look at the emotional state of the individual and give them the skills. Because I believe the way forward in healthcare, Deirdre, is in educating families to understand what it is that they can do within their own home. Because medicine, in a way, has failed in delivering the quality of service. While it has a role to play, it has failed in delivering the quality of service that's relevant to compete with the problems in our society today. And I think that what's needed is that, and this is my aim over the next couple of years, is to bring into the family environment, to say to a mother who has a child that's ill, or to a member of family who has a parent that's ill, I can show you how to do certain energy techniques. I can talk with you about how to deal with your emotional stress. I can get your mental state right and get you focused in the right direction. I can help to teach you to understand about your nutrition. And when you take that approach and engage in a process like this, then absolutely we know that people's quality of life can be improved hugely, Deirdre.
Now, I know I was just looking on your website, Michael, and you talk a lot about children having problems, and particularly behavioural problems nowadays.
Yes.
And you seem to put a lot of that back to how they came into the world. If, for example, they were a forceps delivery or a C-section or whatever. And you put a lot of store by that a lot of that could lead back to the birthing process.
And there's absolutely no doubt again, and again I'll be talking about the science around that and what has been established. That I often say to people, if you're lying inside in bed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and somebody comes in and catches you by the neck and pulls you out of that bed, how would you feel? Now think of an unborn child lying in the mother's womb, sitting inside there, relaxed, breathing normally, everything fine. Somebody cuts the tummy open and puts the hands in, grabs the child and pulls it out. Immediately that child goes into a traumatic, shockful, stressful state. Now that has huge implications. And while sometimes these procedures are necessary, we need to understand the implications. And we know now the research has been done to show that these children are more likely to end up, because of that shock and stress and trauma at birth, with conditions like learning and behavioural difficulties, with conditions like colic, eczema, and nasal type problems, respiratory type problems. So there's a huge body of research around that. So conception, womb life and birth plays a major role in the foundation of our lives. And if we don't get that right, and if there are implications, we certainly have to address it. If we don't address it, then there are huge implications down the road for some kids.
There's a lot of people like yourself around nowadays, Michael, and I'm not being cynical, but everybody seems to have a different approach and a different solution. And with some of them, it's exercise, and with some of them, it's if you take, particular oils or vitamins or whatever. And you couldn't be blamed for being cynical. A lot of people are cynical and they say, oh, for God's sake, somebody else with another magic solution to all of health's evils. Because it does sound a little bit oversimplistic sometimes.
Well, you see, it's not really the key. I mean, this is what has been established, that that often it's the simple lifestyle changes. You see, what happens, Deirdre, is that I've been doing this work for 24 years. I work here. I work with a lot of medical people. I train them. I work in the UK and America, and for 24 years we've been doing this. We've established the credibility of our approach. But you're right. There is a huge skepticism out there and the skepticism right now is with the health service, because people know that drugs no longer provide the answers. We cannot sit around idly by and look at our children being prescribed Ritalin, Concerta and other antidepressants. I have kids of 12 and 13 years of age coming into my clinic on Prozac. So we need to change the medical model, and we need to look at that simplistic approach. And we can be eating the right food, and you can be training every day. And there are people who do this. But if you're emotionally stressed, if you have a lot of fear and anxiety in your life, it doesn't make a difference what food you eat, because it is that emotional stress that plays the major role. And I think if we can educate our society, and particularly in the present economic climate that we exist in, I think if we can educate our society to take responsibility, because what I want society to do, and what I want people listening to this program to do, is this: wake up out of the illusion. No one has a magic wand or a miracle pill. What I can do is I can teach you to take responsibility for your own life. We can initiate the process to what we do, but the buck stops with you. And we just need, Deirdre, to go back and educate society and take back that responsibility, so that no doctor, no therapist, no healer is responsible. That all we do is we give the techniques and the tools and the skills to people. If we do that, initiate the process, then we can determine the type of life that we have.
And if there was just one thing you would advise everyone listening this afternoon to do, Michael, to improve their overall health and well-being, what would that be?
Very simple. We're all on the journey from the birth to death. Everyone listening to this, no matter who we are, status or whatever, we're all on the journey to the grave. Now, we must pull back. We must try to stop the type of worrying and the stress that we have in our lives. We've got to learn to cope with that on a daily basis. And if I was to say one thing to people, to try to cope with the stress on a daily basis, just to take control of what you can take control of. Forget about tomorrow, next week, the next day. I know there are issues, but the only way that you can achieve anything is by building on today. Make sure that you can learn to deal with your stress levels. If you learn to deal with your stress levels on a daily basis, even though your situation mightn't change, but if you can learn to deal with it on a daily basis, at the very least, you can come out of this with your health intact. And that is the biggest challenge. The greatest investment we must make in our lives is in our health, because if we lose it, we have nothing.
Okay, Michael, well, I think it's very interesting indeed. And you're in An Riocht tomorrow night in Castleisland, Health and Leisure Club at 8 o'clock, and I believe there's still tickets available.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a huge interest in it. I've been talking to Mary Cairns on it. I know they only have a certain amount, and I know that people coming tomorrow night, that I know going away, and this is not coming from an egotistical base, this is really coming from just experience. I know that if people were to implement just some of the things that I would talk about, what I want to do is get their mindsets very clear about the fact that they can influence what happens in their lives. And if they take that away tomorrow night, Deirdre, then I know that it can be very positive evening.
Very good. Well, listen, thanks a million for talking to us on the programme, and I'm sure that lots of people will be interested in finding out more about what you have to say, Michael, who's going to be in Castleisland tomorrow night at 8 o'clock giving a talk on taking control of your health. By the way, I should have mentioned, I didn't get around to it because the clock was against us, but Michael is the man who is credited with having brought Michael Flatley, the very famous dancer, back to full health. You might remember a couple of years ago, Michael Flatley was struck down by a mystery virus, and it was Michael Doherty who eventually got to the bottom of it and got him back to full health. So there you go, in case you think his name sounds a bit familiar. And you can find out more about him on his website, michaeldoherty.com, by the way, which has some very interesting reading on it. It's 12 minutes past 2. You're listening to